So, you just bought a camera, and now you're sitting there like, what are all these buttons for? Well, let's get into that. If you're as stupid as me, you will end up like this, carrying around way too much you don't need. So, here we are, sweaty, and it's not as sunny as they promised. That's what we had that for. So, this is practically what your camera will come like, but it will have certainly a cover on here, which I forgot because, you know, I'm extremely good at planning. This is kind of what your lens will come like, cover on the front, cover on the back, and we right away notice that little red mark here, because we need that. You have another red mark on top of your lens mount. So first things first, take the cover off the camera body. We'll take this open, line the red mark up with the red dot in the lens mount, rotate in your direction, or just if you have it in front of you, rotate it to the left from your point of view. And then, of course, you can turn on the camera and take amazing pictures. Simple, isn't it? Well, it's actually not. I lied. So, let's get over the kind of important stuff of how to set this thing up and what all these nifty little buttons do. There's a little bit of difference between your camera and mine, but that's okay. We'll try to remedy that in this video. Never forget to put your lens caps back where you can lose them. It's a pain in the ass. So let's go over some things. Physics first. Electronic viewfinder. This is the sensor to activate the electronic viewfinder. You won't have this. It's a touch bar and it's absolutely useless. You will have this wheel. How to set it up, I'll show you in a moment. You will have the AF on button, the star button, the magnifier button, the info button, the four-way wheel, it's not really a wheel, the Q set button, the play and delete button, and you will have the menu button as well as the on-off switch. We'll ignore things you probably won't need at first, so let's go over other buttons you should have. This is your shutter button, you know, that makes the click. The MFN button should be in the same position. You will have the front wheel. There should be a lock, but as a lever. At this wheel you won't have the mode button because that screen on your camera is replaced with a mode dial, which we will set to manual, of course, because, you know, it's cool. And you will miss the illumination button there somewhere where the record button is. That's nice as well. Rear screen will be essentially the same. You can put it out like that, rotate it, close it up again, and it looks like your average camera. On the front there is practically nothing different except nothing, if I remember correctly. We'll not go over the ports this time. We'll not cover your battery compartment or your card compartment. Well, it's both in the grip, and you will certainly figure that out. So let's clean this up very professionally and then turn it on. Oh, we moved it to the on position because, yeah, we're cool. So we can see. Why can't we see? Because, oh hell, we forgot to take off the lens cover. There we go. We can still not see. So let's go to, oh, this lens only goes to f8. Now we'll see things. Doesn't matter right away, because actually we're going in the menu first, and we'll start at the first menu. Red menu, number 1, image quality set to RAW, no JPEG. Why? It saves space on your card, and to be quite honest, JPEGs are nice to have if you want to send them to your clients, but let's be honest, we're in Europe, we all don't really have that many clients. Set OK. You will not have the dual pixel RAW, I believe. Cropping aspect ratio set to full. Image review set to off. Image review set to off means the back screen or the EVF, whichever is active at the moment, will not show you the image taken, which saves tremendous amounts of battery. Release shutter without card, set this to off, otherwise you will start shooting, and you will have like a ton of nice pictures but not taken because there's no card in the camera. Red menu number 2, lens aberration correction, leave it as is, should be good for almost all lenses. External speed light control is for when you have flash on camera or off camera and a cable attached to it. Probably don't have a flash by now. Well, shoot in sunlight, that's what I did. Exposure compensation, leave it as is at 0. ISO speed settings, I personally would recommend setting the ISO speed range to minimum, whichever you have, 50 or 100 to 12,800. Everything else will get extremely noisy, so leave it at that. Auto range set to a minimum of 100, and then again maximum of 12,800, which means no shooting in the dark, but that's what flashes are for. Minimum shutter speed, auto, should be fine. Auto lighting optimizer, set this to off. You don't want the camera to mess with your images, you do that yourself. Highlight tone priority, it's a nice feature. I personally never use it. I'm not sure the RP has it, so I'll leave it to off. Metering timer, 8 seconds, that's okay. Exposure simulation, enable. What that does is, as you change your settings, the camera will show you down here on this little scale how good your exposure is. That is determined perfect and almost all the time will work. You can, of course, shoot however you want. For example, if you want to emphasize the lights in the background, want an easier way to edit, and my camera is actually not because it's in manual. It's in manual. Okay. No, I don't want manual focus. Oh, focus mode. Here we go. Yeah, some lenses don't have a manual focus switch. That is off-putting as hell. Where have we been? Exposure simulation. Right. So what exposure simulation does, it will show you on the display or in the viewfinder as you change settings how your image should look afterwards. Like I said, if you hit the middle of the scale, that's practically considered perfect. If you have highlights in that corner that you want to emphasize and you want the rest a little bit lower, you can go like this, and this still looks pretty good. So one stop underexposed, that's the minus side of things. Boom. Anyways, enable that. White balance, auto white balance is fine for the most things you probably do. Custom white balance, Yeah, let's not do that. White balance shift, leave it as is. Color space sRGB is fine. Picture style standard. Everything else looks a little bit over processed. Long exposure noise reduction, I'll leave that on off. High ISO speed noise reduction, I'll leave that on off. I do that both in post. Dust delete data, don't touch it, never touch it, don't even think about it. Touch shutter. Touch shutter is so you can shoot pictures like that. And to be honest, you don't want that, so disable that. Multiple exposure, not active at the moment. You can use that if you need it, but that's for another lesson. HDR mode, disable if you have it, it's not worth it. Red menu 6, bulb timer, we'll go over that another time. Anti-flicker shoot. Interesting if you're at the venue and there's loads of different lights, you'll need that then. Other than that, leave it disabled. Silent shutter, you don't have that in the menu, so don't even think about it. And you can forego that as well. AF operation, your menu will differ a little bit from this one. For beginners, I would highly recommend set one-shot AF to one-shot, AF operation to one-shot AF. AF method, I usually use one of these three. Well, I'll show them to you. That's full autofocus with tracking. If I start focusing, it does whatever it wants, if it wants to, and not really what I want, so I rarely use that. 1-point AF, one of the best options you have. Let's reset that. It focuses where you tell it to focus, which is extremely nice, and it's a small focus point, so if you say like wanna focus right here on the edge of the table, you can do that. If you want to focus a little bit further away, you can do that too. Then there's expand AF area, which is nice. It gives the focusing system a little bit of more leeway. Nice for people in a city, cars, or birds if they actually come close. And then there's expand AF area around, which is also usually a good option, but it doesn't always work in every situation. So one of these two for beginners. AF frame size, small. Eye detection, we'll go over that another time. That only works with, but let's go over it now. Tracking, eye detection enabled. There's no eye in the scene, so that's that. Works okay. It's not the best, don't worry about it. Continuous AF, disable, cost battery, not worth it. Touch and drag AF settings, these are important because older Pro DSLRs had a joystick right about here or here. Doesn't exist anymore because Canon, you know, they have a hammer and they like to cripple things. That's why it's called a cripple hammer. Open that, touch and drag AF enabled, positioning method relative, active touch area right. What this does is when you have your eye up to the viewfinder, instead of changing the focusing point, if you're not having the focusing point in the middle, and go like, I want to set it here, and then I swivel and the focusing point is still there. If you want to move it around, you hold your eye up to the viewfinder and you have the right side of the screen practically as a joystick. Takes a little bit to get used to. I'm still getting used to it. Nice feature to have. Focus mode, autofocus. You don't want to meddle with manual focus at first. MF peaking settings, focusing guides. I'm not sure the RP has that, so we forgo that. Tracking sensitivity, leave it as is. All set to 0, that's okay. Lens electronic MF, leave it as is. AF assist beam firing, leave it as is. One shot AF release prior, leave it as is. Lens drive when AF is impossible. I have no idea if I ever turned that off. You will probably want to leave it as it is. Alright. Orientation linked AF point. You should have that somewhere in the menu. Take the lower, like separate AF points, PT only. What this does is, say I have for landscapes, my last focusing point was here, because I wanted it that way. If I turn the camera now, the portrait orientation has its own settings for the focus point. So if I turn it back, it's where I left it. If I turn it back, it's where I left it. Pretty nifty feature. Initial 0 AF point for face eye detect auto. I don't know if I ever changed that. Might meddle with it someday. Ignore it. Here we only change. Nope. Nothing. I have no idea if I ever changed something in here. Magnification approximately actual size from select to center point. That's a nice thing to have. Other than that, that's alright. At first you won't need that file name. If you can change it, you can change it to something you like. On the RP I left it as it was. Auto rotate, put that on. Format card, don't touch it before you saved your pictures and save them twice. Eco mode off, not worth. Power saving, display off 1 minute, auto power off 3 minutes. You can set it not to 1 minute, so leave it. Viewfinder off 1 minute suffices. Display brightness should be good in most situations. Display color tone, leave it at standard. Set the time, especially set the language. Yellow number 3, video system, PAL touch control standard. Beep, disable that. You don't want that. It's annoying as f. That's a point you don't have. Sensor cleaning, nice if there's some dust on the sensor because you don't have a dust shutter over the sensor. Camera does it automatically when you shut it off, but every once in a while you need that. If you need that, take the lens off, turn that on, hold the camera like this so the dust can fall out. Nice thing to that. HDMI resolution, don't meddle with it. Doesn't have to concern you right away. If it ever comes to that, we can come back to that. Shooting info display, screen info settings. Here you can change what you want to see on the info screen. I have the first 3, suffices for me. VF info toggle settings. I can use the info button to toggle between these 3. Nice thing to have. VF vertical display, turn that on because for the viewfinder it then will rotate all the information that's on the screen, like what you see here. It will turn around in the viewfinder, not like on the back screen, but actually in the viewfinder it will turn around, look much nicer, and you don't have to have your head on the swivel to read it. What else? Grid display. I like 3x3 and diagonal. That's the lines you can't see because they're black right now, or gray. Maybe you can see that. It's a nice thing to have. Helps with lining up targets. Histogram display brightness is okay. Focus distance display, I'm not sure if you have that. If you do, in manual focus mode. That's it. Display performance. On the RP I had it on power saving all the time. That works well and saves a lot of power. It's not the fastest, but with most subjects you would probably try to shoot first. It should suffice. VF display format, I like to have that a little bit punched in. it's easier to see if you have glasses on. Display settings, control auto, that's it. Helps text size, never read that. Wireless communication settings, GPS device settings, you don't have a GPS device. Wireless communication settings we can go over another time. Multifunction lock. I lock everything except for the touch control in case I need to move the shutter around. That's a lever right beneath that dial on your camera. I do have a lock button. Custom shooting mode, I don't really touch them, I don't really use them so far. Maybe in the future, if I do, I'll let you know. Don't touch that. Copyright information, open that, enter your name, enter your copyright details, go back. You don't need that, you don't need that. Firmware should be the newest, if not, we'll go over that. Just let me know. Orange menu. Exposure level increments 1/3 of a stop. ISO speed setting increments 1/3 of a stop. Bracketing auto cancel on. Bracketing sequence, I'm pretty sure the RP doesn't have that. Don't worry about it. Number of bracketed shots depends on how many you need. Safety shift, no idea what it is, never touched it. Same expo for new aperture, never touched that. I haven't set these, as you can see. Dial direction is always to the left is minus, to the right is plus. I struggle with that sometimes on the real dial, but hey, that's it. That's how I set it up. It works. Customize buttons. Important. I'll show you how I set up my camera, because I think this is really a good setup and it works extremely well for me. If you struggle with that, you can always reset it to standard. So, shutter button, metering half press, metering start. That's your shutter button. If you press it half, you will feel a little bit of resistance before it actually comes to the release point for the shutter. So a half press will start metering. Metering will determine if your exposure is right, if it's underexposed, overexposed. You see how the scale changes? If I leave my finger half pressed down, it will tell me how the exposure is looking. So, next one. Movie button, I set that to set AF point to center. What that does is, if I move the AF point, the white bracket right here, to somewhere, and I really want to have back to center super quick, I use the record button to set it back. Works extremely well. MFN, dial function, I didn't change that. LCD panel illumination button, you don't have that. Mode button, you don't have that because you have a mode dial. AF on, this little nifty button right here, I set that to metering and AF start. What that does is, as the camera ships and is set up from the factory, metering and autofocus is set to a half press. I really don't like that, because sometimes you half press and you're a little bit shaky, and especially if you are at a slower shutter speed, sometimes it just happens that the half press and the little bit of force you need to press the actual shutter will result in a blurry image. So I set, let's get back to it, metering and AF start to the AF on button. What that does is you use actually the AF on button for your focus and your metering, and that is a really nice way to do it. It's much simpler because it decouples in your brain that you go and focus before you take a picture. That is not what I wanted. Let's get back. Customize buttons. we were at AF on. I set the star button to eye detection AF. This button if I'm in IAF mode. AF point button, magnify and reduce. That's a nifty little feature you should have as well, because you know you can punch in and see how your focus is looking. Boom, focus. What else? Lens, AF stop button. There's no button on these lenses as of now, don't worry about it. Up button, direct AF point selection, that moves the AF point upwards, to the left, to the right, downwards. Set, leave that on cue. That's this little button. That's nice to have. I didn't fiddle with the movie record settings, so I'm not telling you anything about that. Customize dials. Front dial, this one here, AV, aperture setting. What that means is you go from f2.8 through all the apertures of your camera, or of your lens rather. Determines how much light you leave in. f2.8, as you see, if I go down and close the aperture blades on the lens, there's less light coming through the lens to the camera. Next dial, back dial. This one here, you have that as well. Shutter speed settings in manual mode. Shutter speed is the speed at which the sensor, at which the shutter goes down and up again and takes a picture. Shutter speed you see on your lower left, right beside your aperture setting. There's your shutter speed. If I go down to f5.6 and want to have perfect exposure, I would need to use 1/40th of a second. 1/30th, 1/25th, 1/20th. That's challenging as f. If you're really stable, you can do that. Otherwise, there's a nice little rule. Always have the double of your focal length. Focal length on this lens is 16 millimeters, so I should use 32. There's no 32 setting. I could get away with 30. If I want to be sure, I should take 40. So how that works in conjunction, I'll show you in a minute. Control ring. The RF lenses do have a nifty little control ring down here, which is pretty nice. If I set that control, it works as intended, and I have set that to ISO change, and as you see on the lower right, it changes the ISO, or if you want to call it like that, the light sensitivity of the sensor. We're in a wooden area. If we were in a bright lit city, I would be at probably 100 ISO. Let's say you're in the dark and you're shooting wide open. Just imagine we're in the dark, you're shooting wide open, and you have your shutter speed as low as you feel comfortable, and you still need a little bit more light because the image is practically dark. You would go up with your ISO. You can also change all these settings if you tap and use the wheel set. If I hit it, but using the dials is much easier after a while. So you don't have that, which is good because it absolutely sucks. Don't touch that. I don't think you need to touch any of these. Clear all custom functions. You should do that if you set those. And these are menus you can create yourself, the green ones. I've set them to what I need the most, if I need it. And you can do as well if you like. So that was the menu. So quick menu: autofocus method, set that to single point. AF operation, set that to one shot. Drive mode, set that to single. Metering mode, first one, flicker shot off. Image quality, leave it at raw. Auto white balance, leave it at auto white balance. Picture style, leave that at S for standard. Lighting optimizer disabled in M or B modes, which is nice, and cropping aspect ratio should be set to full. So now let's use the camera. So you just attached your lens, you took the lens cover off, which is nice. You turn your camera on and you point it somewhere and you're like, now your brand new super expensive camera has blurry images. Perfect. If you would just take them, they would be blurry. Nice. Not really. So since we set the AF on button to start focusing and metering, we're gonna do that right now. We'll start focusing and release the button. Now the lens and the camera focused on the point, or on what is within your white circle. If the camera acquires focus, so if the camera is thinking like, oh, there's something I can focus on, it will show green until you release the button, which you can do. And then you take a picture. If you're like, okay, this is standard setting, I'm at ISO, or usually standard setting should be auto ISO. I rarely use that unless I'm shooting birds, which I'm still learning. So first of all, ISO, set that to 100. If it looks dark, that's okay, because we can play a little bit. With front dial to the left, we adjust the aperture. It's already at its brightest aperture. Rear dial to the left, we adjust the shutter speeds. Now the question is, can we get away with that? Probably, because my hand is resting on a table. So if I just want to check if the exposure is right and not refocus, I'm using a half press on the shutter button. That's this one, half press, and tells me exposure is good. I should probably get away with that with these settings: ISO 100, f2.8, 1/25th of a second shutter speed. We'll see that in post. And that's practically it. If you find yourself that you need your highest possible or your widest possible aperture and at least a setting that's recommended for the shutter speed, but the image is still too dark, what you can do is adjust your ISO. Let's say for 200, let's just meter and see how it looks. That looks okay. Let's say you're in the woods like me and you want to shoot something that's moving and you want to freeze the action. In the woods I usually am at 400 ISO to 800 ISO, because what that does is I can shoot wide open and still have a faster shutter speed of 200th of a second. If you really want to freeze something, you'd be somewhere around 640 to whatever thousand you have. And now if we meter, we're underexposed in this situation right here, which is really a challenging situation because it's dark. You could of course compensate for that with, let's say, 1600 ISO. You're almost a stop underexposed. You should be able to recover that in post. So that's where we are right now. and that's where I will leave you for this instance. Have fun.